Hello and welcome to the panel discussion entitled Electronic Direct Democracy and Popular Uprisings on the Internet. In this panel discussion, we will discuss electronic direct democracy concept as a model for political and community organization of digital society. We will ask ourselves what are the preconditions needed for its implementation and what lessons have we learned from its practical examples, like liquid democracy and e-referendums. Finally, we will discuss the impact of popular uprisings on the internet as a reaction to current crisis of political and economic governance. And we will also try to touch the topic of increasing digital regulation and internet control. Speakers joining us today are, we changed half of them. No, just laughing. So we have Bojana Sekeljic from Doku Kino, Foundation for New Communication from Sarajevo. Welcome. Then we have Simon Delakorda, Institute for Electronic Participation. Welcome. We have Filip Dobranic, Hekonic Startup School and web portal danesjanodan.si. Hi. And last and not least, Mr. Young Man, Direct Democracy Network, Mreža za neposrednu demokraciju u Sloveniji. Welcome. Okay, let us start with defining or laying down the foundation what electronic democracy, direct democracy is. So how would you individually define electronic direct democracy?
Okay, direct electronic democracy means that we are using new technologies. Some would say that this is nothing new, because we already had direct democracy from the concepts of the Greek democracy, like Agora, Greek city-states polis, when the all adult men participated in direct decision-making by voting on common issues. But the problem is that these concepts at these modern societies sometimes are hard to implement because of the complexity and because of the diversity of the citizens groups and the interest which are trying to influence decision-making. And this is where the technology can help us. And I would say this is my first scope of the electronic democracy as I perceive it, and I hope my colleagues will add or change it also.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go in round.
Sure.
I'm really glad that you started with this reevaluating how we perceive the democracy and how it's basically it depends on the particular part of the world or particular part of the country or the city. The e-democracy for me and using ICT for influencing your society and your surrounding is founded basically on three points. First, new technology is giving us the political knowledge. With new technologies, new media, open data concepts and all that, people have the greatest access to information concerned by governing their countries or local communities. And with the thing that we are hoping for that is if they have a greater knowledge, they will be more empowered to make better decisions. The next step is that with ICT, we have this new arena where we can show our trust or distrust with our governments or representatives. And the next third part, when we have the knowledge, we decide if we trust them or not. Then the third part is actually influencing the decision-making process or actually participating in the political arena. And this last third part, which is the crucial, which actually makes the change, is not really depending on technology. It's really depending on how we as citizens see our society, our role in a civil society and our role towards the governments. And I think that we are now there is this threat that we will step into this pitfall of seeing new technologies as Deus ex machina that will resolve all the issues with the democracy, all this divide between governments and its citizens. But I think that in order to make a real change, we need to use ICT. We need to use it just as a catalyst, as a helper, but we need to go back to our core role as civil society representative or civil society evangelists, is to actually make people more interested into participating in the political life of their communities. So that would be my opening remarks. Thank you.
Good openings, thank you.
So I think this idea of electronic direct democracy doesn't explain anything. I think that's the problem with it. I think it has great mobilizing power. I think there's a bunch of people who have now joined under this idea. I just don't think as a concept it serves us yet. I don't think anyone knows what it is. It is therefore useless for now. And I think it's problematic because of two things. Number one, because I don't think it's really electronic, because we've had electronics for quite a while. The thing that enabled us to become more politically engaged was this thing we call the internet, something that is dependent on electronics, but has a life of its own. It is a completely different sphere of operations. So it isn't enough for us to have smartphones and SMS gates and so on and so forth. We need an ecosystem where these types of things can live. So I think it would be much more useful for us to consider the changes that are happening in terms of the internet, not necessarily only information technology. And the second problem with that is that it's not really direct, is it? Because even if we do say that we now can have online referenda, who asks the question on which we're going to vote? We don't really get to say everything that we want to say. Even experiments such as liquid democracy, which I think are amazing, aren't really direct. They're still representative. I think that the changes that we're noticing instead is in the way, firstly, we communicate with the representatives that we have in whatever position they may be, in whatever form this representation might take. And secondly, I think it has raised our expectations as far as our representatives are concerned. And I don't know if it's just me. I grew up on the internet, and I therefore have, at least it seems, a completely different expectation as to how much my voice counts. I find it unacceptable for someone to think that just because they're a political representative, if I send them an email and because I am nothing, they don't have a responsibility to answer me on that email. I genuinely believe that it is their responsibility to answer me, even if it goes as low as some people would say as Twitter. And I think these are the things that are actually bringing change, or that are actually marking a new era in our democratic participation, not necessarily the chips and electronics that we use.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you. I completely agree with my colleague, and I'm faced with many problems what direct democracy might be. From popular uprising point of view, there are many issues, names, suggestions, and so on. And basically, we can't reach an agreement among a lot of people because despite the fact that we are talking about direct democracy for years, we don't have a system which enables decisions. That's a fact. There are a few beta versions and so on, and the guys did some implementations, but basically we are in some gray area. We are expecting much, but basically we don't have almost anything. So we are all waiting for something to happen, and buzzword is direct democracy, which actually is not a direct democracy because it's ideal, and it is representative in a way. It's a liquid democracy. So we'll see what will happen in years. Will we succeed or not? But I like to say that direct democracy is a bitch. So it might be good, it might be bad. We don't know what to expect. It depends on us, on everybody.
Okay. Okay, this is great. So what we heard in this first round, that electronic democracy, direct democracy, like Simon said, is a part of democracy ocean, so one certain democracy. Then Bojana said, you know, yeah, it's good that we are informed citizens, that we discuss, that we are in interaction with the decision makers, but the real action is happening in decision making. And this is not like tech oriented, like this depends on how active we are as citizens, so this counts. Then what Filip said, you know, there is no real electronic democracy and it's not direct. And also you, Youngman, said, you know, it's a bitch. So there is no agreement what direct democracy really is, and it's a complex thing, it's hard to discuss. But what I see we have all in common, that we are in a way waiting for something to happen, and we would like to see some change, some political change in our society. So my next question would be, in this complex field where there is no agreement what direct democracy is, I would like to pin out or hear some examples. We mentioned liquid democracy. What good cases, examples do we know in Slovenia, Europe, across the globe in this field? And don't mind the strict definitions now. So what good cases have you seen with your work in fields of democracy, electronic democracy, direct democracy, which I would say had some real impact on decision-making or social change in real life? Who would like to go first?
I have a mic, so I
okay,
can start.
go for it.
Okay. First example I encountered direct democracy was a liquid feedback system from German Pirate Party. And it was a complex system, not easy to use. And as I read these days, German Pirate Party is going down. So this was one experiment where direct democracy didn't turn out. I mean, it was a lot of noise, and there need to be some studies what happened with this, because that's the part I said, it's a bitch, because when everybody has its voice, it can happen that it's not the wisdom of the crowd, but it's silliness or something of the crowd. So it is, we need to empower and have some more consciousness. It's about personal. It's not about system, but it's about us. So question is, when direct democracy will succeed is about us. If we are ready to participate in such a system, if we are not, and we start to use such systems, we will go down instead of up. That is my experience, and
Okay.
So for me, I think that if we are going to talk about electronic direct democracy, I think that we need to consider all the levels of what it means to be a participant in a democratic process. And I think that there isn't going to be one single solution that is going to fix everything for us. But I think that even different areas and even different countries face different problems as far as their democratic engagement is concerned. So the stuff I like is, for instance, the Ushahidi project, which was born out of violence next to elections. So it was designed for people to tell each other, don't go there, they'll beat you up at that polling station, go to a different one, right? And while it might not be something that directly involves a decision-making process, I think it definitely served the democratic movement in those countries. I think stuff like Fix My Street, for instance, is very interesting because it tackles problems that are on the ground, and it gives people a reporting tool to tell the government, the people responsible, saying, look, I need this bench fixed, pretty please. I live here, I give my money to you to do this sort of stuff, now please go and do this. I also think projects like the petitions on the White House's webpage, I think are, while they are pretty much makeup, I think they do serve to give us a sense that we can participate in democracy, right? So when we have a movement that is able to launch a petition for the US to build a Death Star, the circular, the Bali ship from Star Wars, and the government is obliged to respond because enough people signed the petition, I think that's amazing. And I think the fact that even though everyone knows it's silly, that the government is now compelled to give an actual response, even explaining why this is something that is silly and that we probably shouldn't be pursuing this. I think these types of things do some very, very cool stuff. But I think that we should never forget that any kind of direct democracy, electronic, internet, or otherwise, is always going to involve an effort on the ground, and it needs to facilitate that effort for it to be successful.
Thank you. You give me a great starting point for my answer to this question. I think that first we need to make a difference. What are we thinking when we say direct democracy in practice? Are we thinking only on like big revolutions like Arab Spring that's being inspired by freedom of information, freedom of online association, and so on, or are we talking about projects like Fix My Street that are basically incorporating the participation of citizens in everyday life, in everyday decision-making process? So, and these two types of citizens' participations using technology is very different and has very different, let's say, very different consequences. If you look at the Arab Spring and what happened after that, I mean, the new technologies are not incorporated into everyday life. The people there do not use new technologies to set new agendas and to set a new course of how their societies are going to live. So that was just one-off thing that happened. Now we can spark a debate whether that would be possible or it wouldn't be possible with or without new technologies, but I think that's irrelevant for this audience. But I would like us to more to focus on including the mechanisms of decision-making process and agenda setting in the everyday political lives of citizens, and what are these other activities that we need to do on the ground. What are the best practices and best campaigning practices on actually including people to use all these like platforms and networks. For instance, if we have Fix My Street, and there have been some examples of using Fix My Street platform in Serbia, for instance. So you have a platform, and I have a broken bench, and I submit a case, and I want someone to solve it. No one's going to solve it because they don't really care. I mean, the government officials on local and all other levels of government are not obliged by the public pressure to do anything, and technology is not going to help with that. They are in the media spotlight in traditional media all the time for doing wrong things, and they're not obliged to change. So why would they compile to the internet public? Of course, there are some people that will say yes, but the internet is decentralized. Everybody has the voice, so we will have a much more input from the people, and that is the groundwork that we need to do. We need to get people to be resilient in pressuring their officials, even though that maybe they will not get the answer. But if we are persistent and stubborn enough for a long period of time, we will succeed. So that's the if we can find a solution how to make online solution how to make people more train people to be more stubborn, I'm all for it.
Okay, In order to further complicate this discussion, I will introduce, I just came out with this, and I just want to share with you. I will try to introduce two types of direct democracies. The old one, direct democracy, and the new one. I will also refer to the old one as the institutionalized direct democracy. I already talked about this Greek example historically. I will also I will continue with the referendum type of the direct democracy we are practicing, and it was developed in the 14th century in Switzerland. And Switzerland is the prime example of this type of direct democracy, which is being institutionalized. And also the other current modern democracies are practicing direct referendums as a kind of safeguard to the representative type of democracy. But the problem is that these referendums are still a part of check and balances system, meaning that although this was the case in Slovenia, the citizens decided one referendum decision, then the parliament didn't go to further to implement it. So there are still these problems with exercising direct political will when coming to the decision makers, representatives, what already Bojana said. And we also have another institutionalized example of direct democracy, which is more going into this part of participatory democracy, which is petitioning. We also have option to directly petition to the government. And I see all this practice as a part of this big family of direct democracy practices, which are being institutionalized, adopted, but within this big chocolate of representative democracy. And at the moment are not really dangerous. But what is the issue is this new types of the direct democracy, what Youngman was actually discussing, which are coming from the development of the digital society and are based on the ethic of the crowdsourcing, the ethic of the open source, of the ethic of the collaborative engagement, all these nice words. When the people are using technologies to collaborate, to do some new communication, new issues, new topics, also experiment with new decision-making system. And this is not institutionalized. It's not a part of the existing system because the political elites are often afraid that this has a lot to do with populist movements. And the governments, the political elites, political parties are those organizations who are afraid a lot of the populist movements. And that's why this, I would say, new type of direct democracy deriving from this development of new technologies takes time to develop. We need to experiment with it. We shouldn't be afraid of it. We should make project with it, experiment, maybe on small scale, maybe even on the local level. And there are some practices, like you just said, the liquid democracy. Also, we have these nice practices of participatory budgeting from the South America, because the budget is a core issue to influence in order to get public policies implemented, and also to improve the quality of life. So, this is my final contribution to this, how we shape the direct democracy concept.
Okay, great. Now, what we discussed and what I can see is that we have like these many concepts, ideas, different types, levels of what direct democracy is. How do we perceive it, right? We have the new way, the new type, the old type, but we have some projects which are quite successful, regardless the concept or idea. So we have crowdsourcing projects, Fix My Streets projects, crowdfunding projects. We have petitions which work. Now, I would like to ask, why do you think certain projects do work for certain communities, in certain areas, and what is the thing that makes them work, and how to think of moving this energy, which works, then to the field of agenda setting and decision making, into political scope. So how can we like transfer what works into different areas?
I think that the solutions that work actually solve a problem. I think that is something that we need to start focusing on, because it seems to me that when people come to the internet, they start throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. 99% of the time, a petition is not going to solve your problem. So if you're going to start off with a petition, you're going to fail. At the same time, I think that 99% of the time, a discussion type web page where you have a platform for people to talk about stuff isn't going to solve your problem. So don't try to force it. So I think that specifically, we as people who do try to encourage people to be more politically active or do consider themselves internet activists, whatever that means, I think we need to be much more clear on what the problems of our users are. And I think the biggest mistake people make is the fact that they think that all the knowledge of the world is stored in the room where they're currently brainstorming. So there's 5 people who think that know what thousands and thousands and thousands of users or potential users actually need to solve their problem, and then they would set up some kind of a platform, and then it wouldn't work. So I think that the key here is to constantly talk to your users to figure out what they need. They are the only ones who can tell you what is actually going to change their lives. And yes, you can make a gamble, you can make an educated guess, but I think that as creators or even moderators or managers of different platforms or movements online, it's not enough to have a Facebook page with Facebook fans, but to have a conversation with them, for them to tell you what it is they need. Do they need a roundtable discussion? Do they need a protest? Do they need infrastructure to set up their own petitions? I don't know, but ask the people what it is they need to solve their problem.
I would give one example from Serbia, South Serbia actually. One of the independent news portals called Južne Vesti, like South News. They started off as just a news portal, a couple of journalists who didn't want to work for corrupted media. They started their own news portal and they started investigating and stuff like that. They realized that all of the corruption that they as journalists discovered, they don't really have any evidence for it. You know, they only have like hearsay, people who are willing to give them information, but they don't want to sign themselves under it. They want to, you know, because the whistleblowers policy, protecting the whistleblowers policy, doesn't really exist in Serbia's legislation. So I think that at the first point they were trying to solve their own problem as to how to get a credible information, and with their solution, they solved everyone else's problems because they incorporated the TOR mechanism into submitting data and proofs of corruption. So in 2 years since they're using TOR, and they set up a special portal called perun.rs where you can submit any evidence of corruption by public officials in that part of Serbia. Without leaving any trace back to you. I think that by using this new technology and by introducing this technology to public in Serbia, they are now starting to create a trust in the technologies in Serbia. So I think that bridging this, for instance, my mother never uses internet to find some information. I don't know whether she needs a passport to go to Macedonia or not. She calls 988 to get the phone number of the Macedonia consulate, and then she calls Macedonia consulate and waits for someone to answer, and then she asks, oh sorry, do I need a passport to go to Macedonia? Because she says, I don't trust information on the internet because anyone can come there and post whatever they want, even though if it's official Macedonian embassy website. So I think that this transfer of using technologies in a very tricky situation and creating trust in those points will spread over to the other areas.
Okay. Okay. So now we're discussing what works and what can be transferred. We were like saying communication, trust, then this can be transferred to other areas. Yes, please.
Yeah, Filip gave a good point about solution has to work, has to solve a problem. So what we are faced with is ideal system for direct democracy which will solve all our problems. So if we go this way, we will fail. And one of the reasons I'm here today, I want to meet with local people who are running meetings in local communities, Misne Četvrti, right, which is basic direct democracy principle. You have to start from the ground, like people we are here gathered, this is one local community, and we can start, talk, learn, and do our deliberative process and reach some agreement. So in 2 years of my work, I changed my focus from big picture to small picture. Start locally, start from small, try to solve one problem, and then when community learns, community sees consequences of their work, positive or negative, but we can see in our local community what works, what don't, so we can learn and go to bigger and bigger, maybe state level and even world. But it won't happen soon, I'm afraid.
Okay, very optimistic.
I'd just like to, there's one thing that I remembered. We need to start talking about user interfaces. I think that even if there's stuff online and even if there's buttons, if those buttons are ugly and my mom can't find them, it's the same as if the thing doesn't exist. So this is something that needs to enter the discussion that we're having as activists.
This is where we come to the participatory design.
Yeah.
So when we design the applications, actually by which we want to create a kind of participation of people, we have to involve them at the first early stage of designing. Not that we make some website and now here it is, use it, nobody's going to use it. This is just but regarding what works and what is not working, I agree with Youngman that it is still very important for online projects that they try to arise from the community building, face-to-face organization, from the community of people who are facing same problems, and also what is very important is that they feel emotionally attached to this issue. Without emotions today, you are not really moving things. Just a rational approach is not going to bring you far. And the third thing, which is also important, but nobody mentioned it, but let's face it, it's money. You still need sources, funding, for running complex projects of involving citizens at different levels. And one issue I would also like to stress here is the danger when the face-to-face movement or the community movement based on local level is expanding into the digital space. And then it is hijacked by all kinds of practices of clicktivism, all kinds of virtual participation when you like, share and so on, but actually it's not really making any impact. I still think that biopolitics, meaning that you bring your body on the street protesting against the concrete institutions, concrete people, is making change. That's why I'm not really a fan of these stories about the Twitter revolutions, Facebook revolutions in Egypt or in North Africa. They didn't happen online. They happened on the street with the bodies going to the squares of people and then protesting and fighting. And many also died for this. And this is how the change of the political relations is actually still happening. Also, like in Serbia, this is this pattern. And the internet, the only value the internet and the social media can have here is they can help to organize, to share information, to get inside what is going on. But technology itself is not really making the democratic changes.
Okay, so we are coming from this broader concept idea of direct electronic democracy. We are coming to the streets. We are coming to the face-to-face engagement. We are coming to communication. We are coming to uprising, to the protests. And we are seeing IT and technology as a tool primarily. And you all stressed out that it's about us. It's about people, the trust, the communication with users, with citizens, and stubbornness. How to be stubborn, how to be politically active. And Youngman said, okay, I'm now focusing on the local level, and I'll try to do in the change first in the local level, but sooner or later, when you will come to a higher level, you will face the state, you will face the government. Then what?
Don't know yet, frankly speaking.
Okay, you don't know it.
Yeah, we'll see, but you have to start somewhere, so you can't take a big bite, but you start somewhere. So if means are right, then goal is right, but I can't say what will be.
Okay, okay.
I think there's two things here. I think that one is launching an attack from the ground up. I think there's 90% of the stuff that we need to fix can be fixed by regular public employees. So by people who aren't really elected, by people who have their job there, and it doesn't really matter who is in the government and who's in the opposition. I think that getting those people on board with these changes will do wonders for what we're trying to achieve. But then secondly, I think that at one point what's going to need to happen is we're going to need to get a party that is going to get their act together and do this internet democracy thing properly, right? So act like a regular party, participate in their regular discussion, have even, so to speak, the cultural capital of the regular party, but at the same time saying, I don't know, we will follow what you tell us every day on this portal that we have, or some kind of other radical change. But I think that we cannot simply expect for the whole political sphere to change until we as geeks will feel comfortable and then step in. I think we're going to need to adapt to their way of doing things, at least for a while, because otherwise I don't think there's any chance of anyone getting into parliament or any other type of elected body.
Well, I would give this like a very utopistic vision. What's happening when we come to the top, and that's our how we defined it, government 2.0. If you look how public services and evolved through time, at first the government didn't really exist as a public service. The government existed as someone who will enforce their own will towards the government. So they had this like a one control watchtower position, and they would control every single aspect of everyone's lives, including private lives, economy, development, education, and so on and so on. In time, citizens started to realize that it's not about the government, it's about us. So we want our government to provide us with the services. And that's where these transformations from government as a governance to a government as a public service started to happen. So in this view, governments became like some sort of a vending machine where you like insert coins and you get the service that you want. But our needs as citizens started to evolve, and we wanted more and more and more, and we wanted more cozy life. We wanted more stuff to be provided by us. And the governments, well, they have this limited number of people, limited number of resources, limited number of knowledge, and they are not able to answer to all the services that we want. So the next step, the next phase is this government 2.0, where government is, let's say, like the iOS platform. They need to provide with a usable SDK, and they need to provide us with the basic services that every citizen need. Everything else is up to us, is up to citizens. To create an app for, I don't know, to get a good, deep understanding in which doctor in public institution is good or bad. The government will not give us that information, but if we crowdsource that information, we create an app, we crowdsource that information, then everybody has the access to that information. So I would say that at the end of our struggle, if I can call it like that, we will have new roles of citizens and governments, and we will have more responsibility on the citizens than on the governments. And I think this is the hardest part because nobody wants more responsibility. That's the thing.
Okay. Great. I will try to answer this question from a rather conservative point of view, very conservative. And I will focus on political parties. I still think, although what you said is actually are all the ways or channels how to solve the crisis of democracy, but I still think that there is still a room also to improve the representative type of democracy, but not only by introducing new technologies in the all kind of government processes and so on, but also to make political parties really to work as they should work in within the representative democracy. I think that we are having huge problems that political parties are not socially responsible, that they're not democratic organizations, that they have poor processes of recruiting the key people which are then proposed on the elections to the citizens to vote. We don't have actually much selection to vote on. We don't have transparency of political parties, and also political parties are often hijacked by lobbyists, by financial interests, and so on. So this culture of democracy within the political parties, which are actually still one of key pillars of what democracy is today and how it's functioning, is actually not being exploited so far. And I think here is also the task of the citizens that we critically demand in relation to the political parties in order to provide better opportunities, better candidates, to be more transparent, to engage citizens into planning of the political programs and so on. I know this is maybe quite strange position, but I still didn't give up on the part of the political parties. But I think that political parties in the future are not going to be the so strong and the sole owner of the political powers as they used to be. And I completely agree with this, how to say, citizens oriented approach to the government, also based on the different types of direct democracy. But the question will be, what is going to be the relationship and the balance? Because in all societies, there is always struggle for the owning the political power. And these struggles are the struggles through the history, and also this technology is not really solving them, but maybe it's even intensifying them. So, and the future of the society, maybe we can have all this technological development, is still not clear. And there is still a lot of scenarios when the things can go down and we can have a big shit of it.
Okay, now I will ask a conservative question myself, and I'm hoping for a new answer to it. But first, the pretext. So we were discussing government as a new way of government, government 2.0, as a platform for citizens, with new roles, new relationships, where communication flows, where government listens to citizens as users and has a good user interface, right? But in our experience, especially in Slovenia and uprisings, we didn't get near that experience. So like the former government told people, treated them as zombies and stuff. So I couldn't say that there was some mutual respect, communication, and especially that government would try to fulfill the citizens' needs. And we were now we were now discussing the old way, the party way, that maybe we should, make better parties, more responsible parties, and try to influence the old political sphere that way. And we were also discussing how should we push the direct democracy in. And my question would be, what should we advocate at the present moment in order to, let's say, encourage active citizenship, to encourage better government practices? Should we go the party way? Should we go the e-democratic way, the direct way? Or how should we combine that?
Yeah, first let's see where we are. We are faced with political systems where parties are corporations, or corporations work for their owners, stakeholders. So that's the political reality. So if we want to go that route, we will be faced with that problem. So, and the party's hierarchical structure exerts power from top to bottom. So you have soldiers and you have few leaders. So that's the main obstacle about going party route, because we want, talking about direct democracy, we think more horizontally, network. We don't want anybody to be alone at the top. And what I see in the reality, in a popular uprising movement, there are ways about stealing that movement and going party way, old way. So that's the first problem. Our idea was establish a political party. Maybe it can be called the last party, which is based on direct democratic principles. So representatives in parliament just vote like people vote on their systems. So this is one way, and have a majority in parliament and then make a new order, That's ideal. I don't know if it's possible or not, but that is one way. But I wanted to say that we are faced with a really hard problem here because we are changing system paradigm. And that's the big problem.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. So I'm going to propose a radical answer, since we had conservative ones before. I genuinely believe that each and every citizen has a right to say, I am not going to engage in the political process. And I don't think anyone has the right to force citizens to participate in that political process. I, for one, am currently spending a ton of my time being what some people would call politically active or performing activist activities. I know that I'm willing to do this for maybe a year and then I'm going to stop. I don't want to spend the rest of my life dealing with politics because I find it extremely boring. And I think that everyone else has the right to say that as well. However, I think that then puts much more responsibility on the governments that we have, on non-governmental organizations that we have, to find ways in which I am going to be willing to participate. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with me only being willing to sign a petition online and not go out on the street. I think that it is perfectly fine for me to say that I am willing to take a picture of a broken bench when I see one, but I will not be constantly engaged with this, and I'm willing to give you 30 seconds of my life, and I expect everything else to happen from then on. And I think that the way we're going to change things is when we're going to start thinking what are the different ways in which we can encourage people to be politically active in small parts of their lives, donating a minute or two every day to building a better society, because we simply cannot expect from people to all become politically engaged. So I think the name of the game lies there, right? Using concepts such as gamification, using stuff that corporations have already figured out to take money from all of us, for us to start leveraging those feelings and those habits to get political ideas from each other. And I think that any kind of direct democracy is going to need to face the problem that 4% of the whole population is going to come and vote for different issues. 96% of the population aren't going to care on that day. And I think that's something that we need to deal with.
I completely agree, and building upon that, I think that people naturally will be willing to be more involved in political whatever activity is if they see that it's going to work, is if they see that they can actually change something, that with that click or share or going or showing up on a protest is actually going to change something. And oftenly, on the other side, we have very bureaucratic governments who don't really care about what citizens are saying, so they're not willing to change. And citizens know this. One citizen knows that him signing a petition or sharing a photo of a corrupted politician will not change anything. I think that we need to, our efforts should go towards trying to bring back faith to the people that they can actually change something, and not necessarily to start with big global changes. Let's have baby steps. Let's try to change something that is not actually, that has nothing to do with the government. Let's see what we can change in our own community of, I don't know, better. Let's plant some trees to have nicer parks, for instance. So I think that if we get people involved on local levels, and when people get used to seeing the results of their works, seeing the result of their activities, that then they will be more motivated to expect that and ask that from the government institutions as well, because the citizens need to have unique voice. The citizens need to have to be organized in a very large front in order to change the system that we have it now. And this is a system error that we are living in, where governments are not really paying attention to what citizens want and need, and being corrupted, non-transparent, and all that. So.
Okay.
Yeah. I could make maybe two quick conclusion about this discussion, that some kind of representativeness in political arena is always going to be necessary. Although because of the people who are not interested in politics, maybe there is also a lot of people who think that we need a professional politicians to represent us. That's why we are also paying them. We also vote them on the elections. And this is completely okay position. But the problem is, if this is the only way that we can influence the decision making about the issues who are having direct impact on the quality of our life, meaning how we are studying, what is the quality of the environment, what are the social services and so on, all those important issues. And the question is here, how much, what are the options for participation in terms of what we can choose from? Of course, one is going to advocate for going to elections. Other one is going to advocate for direct democracy. Others are would like to have more participatory, balanced approach. And I think what we need to have is, in the future of political democracy, that we have different pillars, different actors, organizations, through which we can participate. Not only political parties, also NGOs, also maybe informal movement, also completely maybe online applications and things like that. So, but at this point, it's very hard to foresee in which direction the development of political democracy is going to go. And that's why I think this is a time of opportunities. Also this crisis, also all the problems we are facing are now opening these questions. And they're making a good place, opportunity to discuss it, to experiment, and to find out that democracy is not something static. Actually, it's very, very dynamic. Although lawyers are always going to try to convince you that the democracy is static, and as it is, it's hard to be changed. But I see it as a dynamic categories, and also conference like this, the discussion like this are actually bringing to this development understanding of democracy.
In a way, it seems to me that we are redefining what means political, to be a political active citizens. We are now talking more, in a way, what makes a difference about quality of life. And we are talking about how to encourage people to be politically active, but every day, in small steps. And we were discussing, okay, the citizens are interested in what works and what has an impact, and they would participate if they would know or have a guarantee, yes, this will make a difference. But who gives the guarantee? How can we say to the people, citizen, you know, if you cooperate in this, this will show there. So where do we look for this missing ingredient, which in a way we agreed it's missing? If we would know it works or it's make a difference, I would do it. So where do we look for this ingredient?
Well, I would say that we are looking for it in our previous experiences, and we are looking for it in the experiences of other similar countries and societies that are going through. So, and this is a very tricky part when we're talking about other similar countries. Every political system is adapted to the political history and the society and the culture of that given state. For instance, the political system in Switzerland is, let's say, the most efficient political system, but it only works in Switzerland. If we would have it in the Balkans, we would have another war in 5 years. So I think that when we are motivating people to participate in our activities, and when we are using these examples from abroad, we have to be very, very careful, because that is something that most often just puts them off. Because if you say, oh, but if you look at the Obama campaign 2008, Obama motivated people, everybody chipped in, you know, he created a new front, but that's not applicable in these areas, and especially wasn't applicable in 2008. So that's 5 years ago now. So I think that I think that NGOs who are pertaining to set new agendas, who are pertaining to involve people, have to, and we talked about this before, have to follow the new trends in communicating online, design-wise. They have to use digital storytelling, for instance, to convey the message and to reach for the bigger audience. They have to, like you say, they have to have this strong emotional context to everything that they're doing. So I think that it's, again, responsibility is on us as NGO people, how to gather support for our activities, and constant learning, constant following and adapting new trends, creating forums like this, whether offline or online, where we will have the unique space where geeks and activists will meet and work together. That's what we need more. We need because activists usually think that geeks, you know, they're just some IT money-hungry people, but if that was the case, we wouldn't have Wikipedia, we wouldn't have Ushahidi, we wouldn't have a lot of tools that NGOs are actually using on a daily basis. So I think that establishing this dialogue and cooperation between geeks and activists could bring this one step further.
So I think there's 3 things here. I think number 1, the answer is ideology. as long as we believe this works, it's going to work, but only insofar as we keep lying to ourselves that this is going to work. And I know it sounds paradoxical, but that is how this type of an institution has the ability to exist. So we all need to believe that it works, and I think that is going to come from a variety of different factors, as you've just said, from past experience, from the way a website looked. And I want you to think real hard right now. Let's say that you need, I don't know, Google Reader was just shut down or will be shut down, and you need a different reader for your news. And you now get two websites that you found on Google, incidentally, and you have to pick one. Which one do you pick? The one who's got a better design, because that somehow means that it's going to provide a better service. And citizens think about that, about tools for their democratic engagement as well. So I think that's number one. Number two, don't force technologies that don't work, right? So for instance, QR codes. And I think that this problem of moving people from the offline world to the online world is a big problem, and the one who's going to solve it is going to have to be a genius. But I think that, for instance, now when you see on jumbo posters a bunch of QR codes, whereas my phone and nobody's phone still doesn't have a QR code reader integrated in your camera, which means I need to download a special app, know how to use it, remember to plug it in. It isn't going to work. So stop wasting your time with technologies that only look hip and would be awesome if everyone would be using them, but they just aren't.
Or only work in Southeast Asia.
Yeah, or only work in Southeast Asia. There's a ton of that as well. Sorry. And I think number three at this point is momentum. The internet is a thing that lives off momentum. You only have a couple of days to launch a campaign, manage it, make it boom, get people involved, and then it's going to die out. And I think, I don't know if you read Mashable, but Mashable recently went through a redesign, and now they have something which is essentially just a piece of eye candy. But on the top right corner of every article, their news site, they have a velocity graph of how fast this article was spreading online. And there's a pattern now that is beginning to repeat, which is an article just jumps up their velocity and then it just flatlines after that, right? So everything on the internet seems to be dependent on this momentum, which means that the times of bringing political change about slowly have gone forever. You'll have 2 weeks tops from when you start off your campaign to motivate the people and to get them to work and actually produce something so that they are then emotionally involved with this. If you don't manage to pull that off immediately, you're pretty much doomed.
Okay. There comes an interesting question now. So, if I understood correctly, what we are saying that this missing ingredient is in adopting new trends, new communication, in adopting, finding the right moment to jump on the momentum, to use the trends which are as gamification, which are used also by other players. But this in a way means that we are all in the same playground at the moment. If before we were like playing, this is my non-governmental playground, this is the governmental playground, we are now all together. And now the question, but who is setting the rules in this common playground now? Like if we set the playground as an internet playground, we have regulation, internet privacy. So in this playground with certain rules which are trying to be even more strict, how do we, if we follow these trends, how can we encourage and empower active citizenship, more political citizenship, more virtuous and consciousness, which we were talking about the whole time?
Given regulation.
Yeah, with given regulation. So aren't you afraid if we follow just the trends which are trendy now, that we might have problems with achieving or getting there, you know, what we said. We want active citizenship in political life every day, as much as possible.
I want to see broader picture here because we have a chance, despite all regulation and everything that's going on in net, in state, and so on, because we're facing demise of the current system. So it's breaking down. We will see a crash. We will see anarchy. And that's, we are reaching a bifurcation point. So we have a chance, we will see two new ways, potentially. And when we are in the lower state of the system, we have a chance to push it the way we want. We don't want to let it the old way. We are protesting against it. So here we have a chance, despite all our limits, regulations, and everything. So here lies the power of hope to work further in this way.
So we are waiting for a broader momentum.
I mean, we are here already.
Okay, good.
I think if the question is who is setting the rules, I think the answer is unequivocally us. We are setting the rules right now because the government sucks on the internet. And I think that we've got about 6 months or a year left before they start figuring out how this thing works. And I think that at this point, it is us who are actually setting the rules. And I know there's been stuff like the ACTA that we had to fight, and we will have to keep on fighting stupid people writing stupid laws for their stupid profit. But we haven't lost the war yet. And I'm going to give you an example. I'm not going to be very specific, but I have stored personal information from people in a text file on a server somewhere in the past, which is illegal as far as my country is concerned. But everyone who participated in that action, in that movement, trusted me. I didn't destroy their trust, I didn't disregard it, I didn't spread their data. I was able to perform an illegal activity without facing punishment because everyone said it is okay. These legal protections right now are only going to prevent us from staying in the momentum, and everything was okay. I'm not going to do that ever again for various reasons, but I think that in that sense, we currently do have the capacity to set the rules. Right? We do have the capacity to go even slightly to perform illegal activities on the internet because we're the ones who know how it works. It is still ours. The question is, how long will it remain ours? We will have to keep on fighting, but I think that right now we do set the rules and we should use that time very, very wisely.
Like we heard in the opening this presentation, there was this word about how how governments and legislation is going pretty slow. So we always have this some kind of new relationship is establishing, and it's not being regulated for some period of time until the governments get a hold of it and start regulating it. It's the same with the internet. But internet, unlike any other thing, is inherently connected with the freedom of speech. And I think that that connection is what will keep internet safe for a long period of time, until we get in some, I don't know, V for Vendetta, post-apocalyptic society. But that's just, you know, we can discuss it later, but it's not that serious of a discussion. But I think that the very nature of internet will save it from the bad guys.
Yes, I agree that the question of the internet governance and the internet control is a very important question at the moment, because at the moment on the global level, internet governance is not democratic. It is, we have these meetings, summits of the national states, like the last one was last year in November, was this global forum regarding the internet governance, and you can see there quite easily different political blocks which are originating from how the world regions and world struggling for the economic development is being divided. On one hand, you have United States, which is actually a key player of the development of the internet and the internet control, supported by the European Union. On the other hand, you have other key players like China, Russia, and those players have different concepts how the future of the internet should look like. For example, in this particular case, the United States and the European Union were advocating for more open internet, or at least less regulated internet in the future. But on the other hand, other players have more ambitions to regulate it within the national borders. What is the problem here is that the public and also the civil society has very limited options or power to influence these decisions and this bargaining and these, how to say, geopolitical, strategical games which are being fought on a big scale among these big powers. And internet is definitely a question, internet governance is definitely a question how the democratic governments should be also implemented on the global level. At the moment, we don't have democratic government on the global level. It's just a governance of national states having these historical roots, and they're having these fights. And although there are a lot of talking about how to democratize the United Nations and all those different things of the global cosmopolitan democracy concepts, but I think the internet is going to be one of the issues or the areas when we'll probably experiment and try, the humankind is going to try to develop the first kind of the global the democratic principles and mechanisms.
Okay, one last question before we give also the audience the option to ask questions. If we are in the position that we can set the rules of the internet playground, what kind of electronic democracy world would you like to see? World, internet space, would you like to see? Would you like to develop in the coming years? What would you like to see? It can be utopian, it can be dystopian, it can be political, it can be apolitical, but you know, like your ideology of direct democracy, your vision.
My wish is simple. I want everyone in the world to have internet access. Before that happens, we didn't really do anything, because while we are connecting ourselves, we're only increasing the gap between us and everyone else who doesn't have access to the internet. So that's my wish.
Okay.
I don't have a vision. No, my vision for e-governance is that every single person with a good idea has the ability to online gather support, gather feedback from the community, campaign for the change they would like to see, and then put that change on the political agenda. That's my vision.
Okay.
It's okay if I would be in position to make just a brief statement. I would say that the internet is having so much impact on our lives, on the quality of life, that it should be regarded as a human right, as this is as a right to the freedom of speech, of movement, all those things. I think this is the basic of everything. And not connecting to your question, I would also like to have a basic income for all citizens, for all people on the earth, also as a human right. I think this is quite connected in terms of political participation and enabling the equality among people.
Great.
My hope and vision is a meritocratic society. So when we are talking about direct democracy, we see there's few few percentage, small percentage participating. So those who want to participate, to engage, those are capable, and those will have to set the rules if they are accepted by majority. So I hope someday I will see this.
Okay, I don't see the organizers, but I think that we have to finish. Yeah, I see the waving. And I would like to say thank you for all the panelists, especially Bojana and Jankman, who dropped in just in the last minutes. So thank you all. So this panel was organized by the Institute for Electronic Participation, and my name is Delakorda. I come from Studio 12, Participatory Internet and TV Media. Thank you again all, and have a good break.